So I'm joined by Alice Wong, who is so many things. She's the founder of the Disability Visibility Project, co-partner in #CryptTheVote, and served as a member on the National Council on Disability as appointment by President Barack Obama. So Alice, thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, I'm going to describe how I look. So I'm a mixed African-American and white woman wearing a long sleeve purple mauve colored turtleneck. I have black hair and a bun on the crown of my head, and I'm wearing silver hoop earrings. I have an AirPod in my right ear, and I'm sitting in front of a plain white backdrop.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Carmella. It's an absolute delight. To describe myself, I am an Asian American disabled woman. I'm wearing a very furry, comfy gray fleece jacket. There is a mask over my nose that's attached to a gray tube, which is for my ventilator. And my background is all dark and black.
Fantastic. So we are so excited to talk to you because when we were putting together our 44 New Voices list, you were one of the first voices to actually be on the list. And your project, the Disability Visibility Project, has similar intentions to 44 New Voices, which is to amplify voices. So when you founded the project in 2014, can you talk a bit about how the project idea came up and what launching it was like?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. First of all, it's just an honor. It's just thrill to be named and identified because I'm still sometimes stunned that people know what I do or have heard about me because it's so kind of weird, but I really appreciate it. I started the DVP in 2014 really as a one person's kind of effort to tell our own stories and document the disability history that's, of today, of the moment. In 2014, there were a lot of disability advocates and organizations getting ready in the lead up to the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is in 2015. And, at that time, I was just, individual, just, splash around here and there. But I thought, should I do something? Like, how can I contribute to this collective effort? And then, as an avid listener of NPR, every Friday they have on Morning Edition a very short clip from StoryCorps. And StoryCorps is a national oral history nonprofit. I went to one of their events and, they talked about community partnerships. So I was like, okay, the light bulb went off. I was like, I wonder if they've done any, partnerships with the disability community. So I reached out to them and they're like, no, this sounds great. So, I started the DVP as really as an oral history campaign that was meant to be for 1 year, encouraging people to go to StoryCorps, bring your friend, bring your family member, and you can talk about anything. You don't have to talk about the ADA or disability rights, but just it's an invitation to tell your own story and to really create your own history. Because I think, as with media representation, there's a lot of gatekeeping. History is told by historians or the victors, and very much from the perspective that's not really reflective of the people they're actually writing about. So for me, I really want to see more stories about us and by us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's kind of a reoccurring theme we're finding too, where it's people in underrepresented communities often don't have the chance to tell their own narrative. So for a long time, you're just kind of stuck with what other people write about you until you can kind of gain your own voice. So what did you end up talking about in the first, I guess, episode for StoryCorps and NPR?
Well, it wasn't really with NPR, but it was anybody could go to a StoryCorps booth or use their app and tell their story. And you can also have the option of archiving at the Library of Congress. So that to me was the really exciting hook, is that we're leaving something for future generations the public and historians to use it. And up to 2020, we have 140 oral histories. So that's pretty cool. I mean, no matter, even if there are any new ones, I think there's a nice little body of work out there. So what I did basically, my role is I use social media. I just like to encourage people. I actually interviewed over 30, 40 people. So like these are mostly people that I admired, people I know from my San Francisco Bay Area, disability community, and these aren't like famous people, right? Like, a lot of these people are just everyday people, and sometimes the thing we think about in terms of history, the media is that sometimes it's all about celebrities or it's like the really well-known people and the icons. But for me, it's like that's like the least important thing. I think the most important thing is really document the whole, range and depth and just all the nuances of our communities and our culture. And I
Yeah,
think that's what
definitely.
a lot of cultures are, trying to do too. That the problem with the lack of representation is that we're talked about like a monolith. It's just that just drives me wild. I just give like so much side eye, right? Like you just can't say the Black community, the Latinx community. It's just it just doesn't really. I mean, it's just like it's a community term, but that you can't generalize. So I think that's really similar to the disability community.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of amplifying voices, this summer you had a book, you published a book called The Disability Visibility, First Person Stories from the 21st Century. So you really got a chance to, or you really made the opportunity for yourself to amplify some of those stories. In the book, you edited 37 different stories from people with disabilities. So how did you select voices for the book?
Yeah, this is really tough, and really similar to the oral history campaign. I wanted it to be about the here and now. So I talked about it as if it was from the 21st century. So these are stories from the year 2000 to 2019. That I really wanted that to be the marker. Just we're really at the beginning of the century, and I'm so curious about what life is going to be like in the next 80 years. I mean, I just don't know what's going to be in front of us. But what we could do is take a snapshot of the here and now that really does look at the past and looks toward the future. These are a lot of stories that I've bookmarked over the years for myself because, I'm just a fan of like all kinds of folks. And this was a wonderful way for me to curate a really small and tight collection of, I think, issues that are so important. And I was very intentional about making sure that there was a huge, really intersectional representation, particularly by disabled people of color, queer disabled people, trans disabled people, all kinds of people, because again, it's really to push back at, the very kind of mediocre, kind of bare bones, low bar kind of uh, coverage that we have now.
Absolutely. And what was the process editing like? What was the process like editing that? I mean, because 37 different stories, right? And so everyone has a completely different narrative and comes from different backgrounds. So how did you like edit the stories without kind of taking like the zhuzh out of the story, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was my responsibility as an editor, just keep as much of what makes it so authentic and just powerful and really personal. And I think, some of the edits were really minor, but, there's some places where, what are some ways we can make sure that the writer really shines? So I think that's, what an editor do because, we're not the writer, so we're coming from it a little bit from the outside perspective. And I think most of the conversations with the writers have been really kind of collaborative and really positive. So, I respect any contributor that doesn't like my edits. Like if they don't want to, I just like I'm not gonna push them on it. And with the publisher, I also felt the need to make sure that I fight for these contributors as well. In terms of selecting them and also their kind of ways of expressing themselves by writing that's maybe like a little bit less conventional writing styles. Like that to me is something I never want to water down, because I do think that with kind of major publishers, there's this, push to be just this to have like grammatical, everything's just, follow a style guide. I really wanted to let them know that there were terms and acronyms and things that I really wanted to retain and not have to explain because the point is to raise the bar, to really ask the reader to like to ask them more questions, right? To really think about, oh, this is not easy, or like, I never thought about this, or this is not what I expected. And I think that's another purpose behind the book is to really center us. And, I make that clear in my introduction too. That's, to the reader, I'm like, you may be unfamiliar with some of these terms, but this is really an invitation. And I hope that a lot of non-disabled people take it with that spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. In reading the intro to your book, I wanted to read a direct quote where you say, to the non-disabled readers of this book, how many disabled creators do you know of? How can you support their work, whether it's a podcast, novel, play, video, or blog? How are you widening your horizons? And that, when I was reading it, that was such a good question, especially because even though there are portrayals of people with disability in the media, and I've talked about this I feel like in classes throughout the semester, the narrative is often told by non-disabled people. So it's inaccurate, like the wants and needs aren't accurate depictions. So how do you think that can be improved going forward, in addition to like continuing to consume content by disabled creators?
Yeah, I would say that definitely, seek out the disabled creators and support their work. That's one way to show that there's a want and a need for it. But I would also say, be our co-conspirators. There's still a very pervasive practice of non-disabled people playing roles for disabled characters. And, there's usually a lot of framing of disabled people when they bring that up as this is problematic. And a lot of non-disabled people are like, oh, Hollywood, it's too hard, or like their sets are inaccessible, or just it's too hard to find the right talent. And these are all things that have been used to keep people out, right, for centuries.
Mhm.
For lots of communities, right? This is just basically a lack of imagination, you know. For example, I'm not sure if you heard of this, but like the musician Sia, she just announced a movie that she's releasing in January, and it features a character who is a non-speaking autistic person, but is played by a regular person without, the person who's not autistic and not non-speaking. And on Twitter, there were just autistic people saying, tweeting at her saying, hey, did you make any, efforts? There's a lot of talented people. And she went off. Like she was just super defensive and just really rude as well. So there's still a lot of work that should be done because I think if people really want to be allies, I know allies is such a box word, and allyship just makes me kind of roll my eyes sometimes. But you know what I mean? Like people just,
Because it can be performative very easily.
oh yeah, they try so hard. They just like they're so oh, I want to be your ally. Just pay me, just pay me, like just pay me. You want to be an ally? You know, pay me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I meet people who you know don't acknowledge their privilege and are really quick to you know be defensive and just don't really listen. I feel like that's the start of any non-disabled person too. That's what they are, either engaging with disability to really think about, you know, their own kind of assumptions and also to do the homework. But there's just so much out there now that's so wonderful and instructive and illuminating, such as my book, that really is sometimes I'm at that point where like there's almost no excuse for people to like not know what ableism is, but I try to remind myself that there's everybody has work to do. So like I'm trying to do my work too. I've got stuff that I don't know about that I should know more about. So everybody should have that grace to learn and to have that time and that space.
Absolutely. And this is, yeah, it's very similar to race as well, where it's, if you don't know something, it's okay not to know something. As long as you like treat it with respect and like ask the right questions, that's totally okay. In my opinion, it varies, but yeah.
Yeah, I think people appreciate that much more than somebody who's like pretending to know it all or just if they're co-opting somebody's culture or language. If you were telling you, don't do that, and you keep on doing that, that's not cool. That's not cool.
Yeah,
You know?
it's definitely a no. Do you remember one of the first pieces of media you consumed that was by a person with disabilities or written about a person with disabilities that you felt was an accurate depiction?
Ooh. Well, I wouldn't say the first one, but you know, I do love really like gritty dark dramas. So on HBO, there was a show called Deadwood. And Deadwood had a really wonderful disabled character named, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name, but she's played by an actress named Jerry Jewell. And she was one of the earliest actors on network TV with a disability. She was on the show called Facts of Life in the 80s. And on Deadwood, she played this woman who like was like a barmaid. And she really was hilarious and just full character. And she wasn't like a main character, but she was part of this ensemble. And I think, you know, that's what's really lovely to see. But, you know, her disability was part of who she was. And it wasn't like that big of a deal. You know, I think that was just like, that's who she is. She didn't have to talk about it. It wasn't a very special episode. You know, I did like that. So things like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. In your career, who have been some of your biggest mentors and role models?
I've had a lot of great mentors. I think I would have to say that mostly my friendships with other disabled women and in particular, other disabled women of color. Like these have been the relationships that really kind of lift me up to make me feel safe. So, you know, I think having a small group of friends where you have these chat groups where you're just like, can you believe this? Like, you know, people that you just like totally be yourself with is such a treasure. And, you know, they mentor me, I mentor them. I think, you know, I'm very lucky to have these friendships. And, yeah, they just make you feel good, but also, I think we hold each other accountable. I think that's the real gift of a friendship, where if they need to be tough on you, they will. But they're doing it out of love.
What's one of the biggest things they've taught you?
Mm. Hmm. Well, I think one of the things that we've been trying to help each other with is that it's okay to slow down. I feel like, whether you're an activist or not, I think all of us, especially with this pandemic, what is time? What is time?
Been a construct.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good chance for us to not really take so much value in the structures we've been living in. This idea of a 9 to 5, which is, even homework, right? Like just your course load. I mean, like students need more flexibility now because they're learning in the most like unusual circumstances. Everybody's on edge. Everybody's kind of dealing with a lot outside of their responsibilities, right? Just outside of school, outside of work, whatever. There's just a lot of pain and challenges and suffering. I mean, there's so many people now. Almost everybody knows somebody with COVID, right? I think this is, and the fact that it's not getting better, it's very scary. And, I think we all need to just give ourselves permission to slow down or just stop. I think that's our capitalist structure in our culture to produce, to keep up. I think it's, such BS. And we all gotta kind of try to resist that impulse because, I want to be around. I think I want everybody else to be around. And we gotta rest and take care of ourselves. And, the term self-care, again, it is overused so much, but it is essentially what I'm talking about.
What's one of your like favorite kinds of self-care that you do?
Mm. Well, there's two things, but I love ice cream. I love it so much. I currently have 4 pints of ice cream in my freezer. So that gives me joy. Like I have a scoop probably every other day, maybe every day, but I'm just, I mean, yoga, right? I just, why not? It's just like, what am I saving it for? Ice cream gives me joy. I would say cat videos give me joy. So like memes about cats, gifs about cats, videos about cats. They're just a wonderful diversion. So any sort of animal video will just, I can feel my blood pressure going down immediately. So that gives me joy.
Amazing. Those are, yeah, definitely when you have a down day, cat videos. I've been looking up like baby Doberman videos recently, and those have been my absolute favorite, especially considering how stressful this past election was. We know in 2021, the administrations will change. We'll have a Biden administration. And you worked for the White House. You served for the White House on the National Council on Disability. And this year was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities, or ADA 30, which prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So what do you want to see from the next administration in the White House?
Wow, well, there's so much. I mean, I think, one of the hardest things is that there's so much damage to undo. So it's really hard to have your agenda when you're just trying to pick up the pieces because our systems and our structures and institutions have really been corrupted. So that's really hard. I have no idea how that's gonna, what's involved in that. But I do think that's, number one, let's stop putting kids in cages at the border. Number two, let's make sure we never repeal the Affordable Care Act, things like that. I think we gotta make sure we preserve civil rights for all groups, and things like the Muslim ban, just stop that. Rescind. For example, there's a public charge rule that's very discriminatory toward new applicants who are immigrants. So there's a public charge rule that I would love to see rescinded. So there's a lot of regulations that just executive orders that I think should be blown up immediately.
Another movement that you're a co-partner in is #CryptTheVote. So how did this year's wide access to be able to do mail-in voting impact people with disabilities? Did it help? Was it, people with disabilities, I know there's often a lot of barriers to vote, and this election has kind of changed that, but how has that impacted this year?
Yeah, so just speaking for myself, I've always voted by mail for like the last 15 years, and it was never an issue until this person, current occupants in the White House that tried to discredit this form of voting, and also by weakening the U.S. Postal Service. I mean, there's such a weird year to think about absentee voting as synonymous with voter fraud, but that's just inaccurate and just super dangerous. So with the pandemic, a lot of states moved to all absentee ballots, which does work for a lot of people, but there's still some people with disabilities that's they can't vote privately and independently. They would be on a ballot. They actually either using a machine, to use something online, but in a way that allows them, privacy. And there were several states that have lawsuits by disabled people, in particular blind or low vision people, saying that they still need alternatives. So that happened in certain states. Then on the flip side, there were other states that basically said, people were allowed to vote by absentee. They had to go in person to the middle of a pandemic, and that there were groups that said, I believe in Texas and in Mississippi, there was a efforts to give an exemption to people who are high risk, that give them the option to be in person, because being in person is really dangerous for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks still wait hours in line. I mean, this is disenfranchisement of so many communities, right? Just older people, very clearly the Black community. I mean, just the way that Georgia and Texas in particular, they have decreased the number of polling places. Texas, they also decreased the number of drop-off locations for ballots. So people would have to get a car, have a ride. It's such such explicit forms of voter suppression, which I think, was really exacerbated by both this pandemic, but clearly this racist administration.
And when you were working for the Obama administration, you were serving on the board, what were some of the issues? What was that like? What were some of the issues that you guys discussed, worked on?
Yeah, there was a number of different issues. I tried to focus on long-term care services So things that provided services in the community so that people don't have to live in institutions. I also was worked on a small project regarding social media accessibility because that's another career passion of mine. But yeah, I think there were a lot of group projects. It was very collaborative in terms of the reports and the kinds of meetings we had. So it was great because I had exposure to a lot of things that I never kind of would have had otherwise.
Amazing. You've done so much in your career. What are some of the things that you're most proud of that you've done?
It's so funny because for most of my life, I thought I was going to be an academic. I went to grad school for sociology. I worked at a university as a staff research associate. So, qualitative research, that was my jam. I thought that was that's my contribution. And, I think most of when I launched the DVP only 6 years ago, I think that was my calling because I think I was tired of waiting for things to improve. I think that's what a lot of people are just tired of. They're just not waiting for Hollywood. They're not waiting for decision makers. So, I started it very modestly, but I really thought this gave me so much joy. It just gave me life. So, I made this decision maybe 2 years after I started to kind of quit my job and focus on it full time. That was risky, but I think, it was the right direction. And, I think what I've done in the last 6 years is kind of amazing. I mean, 6 years is not really that long, but for a one person operation, my podcast I'm very proud of. I'm about to do later this spring. I'm going to reach my 100th episode. So
Congratulations.
That's a big.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that I think I'm really proud of publishing guest essays by disabled people on my blog. And of course, this book. And then a previous anthology that I self-published called Resistance and Hope. And that was really my first experience editing a small collection of essays. And this anthology was really like my practice run, even though at the time I didn't even know that this book that I have now was in the works. So it's very weird how everything's so aligned. But that one came out of my own desire to focus on disabled people's wisdom, on the relationship between resistance and hope in the time of Trump, because the idea for it came the evening of Election Day in 2016. Everybody's freaking out. I was freaking out, and I thought, okay, what can we do as a community? And this is my little offering.
What can we look out for you doing next? What are your next projects that you're looking forward to? In addition to your 100th episode, because again, that's incredible.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that. So I will say it's kind of exciting. By disability anthology, there's going to be a YA version. So that'll be out next year. So it's going to have a new introduction for young people, which I'm just really delighted by. I just reaching out to younger people in junior high and high school. So I look forward to that. I get a few other surprises. Just, things that are bubbly, they will all be revealed at your time.
We'll have to wait and see. That's the ultimate teaser. Fantastic.
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carmella, for having me.